Now I got some rust to fix. Ay, ay, ay. That's alright. Alright, what we're doing is we're going to build a split wishbone for this. This is a wishbone. This is a Model A wishbone, and it mounts on the axle and pivots like this for the stock suspension setup. Well, the frame's upside down, but when it's in the car, it's in the room for modern transmissions. So that's why people split the wishbones. So what I got here is this is a 35 to 41 Ford wishbone, and I've cut the end off and split it, and I'll be showing you what we're going to do here. We're going to weld in this bung here on the end, and then the bung here, hold on, the bung will receive a tie rod end. It gets threaded into here. Oh, it goes all the way in. I'm not going to screw it all the way in because I got to take it back out, but this will attach to the axle here. The frame's upside down, but this will attach to the axle. Then on the frame, I've got this wishbone mount with a 7-degree taper that matches the tie rod end. So when this is here, this will be welded to the frame. The wishbone will be mounted like this on the axle and go up and down and be spread outside here. So what I'm going to show you is where we cut this off. I got a nice chamfer around here. This is a wishbone. This piece here is made by Speedway Motors. I bought this kit from them with the tie rod ends and the bung for this. So when I cut the end, cut this open, the end of the wishbone was forged. I cut it just inside the weld. I filed this down because it was a little rough on the inside, and I got the bung, this 1-inch bung, and just slips in there pretty snug. Then I'll leave a gap here to get good weld penetration to weld it on, and I'll fill this up and grind it smooth. But when we do that, we'll have a split wishbone. Now these 35 to 41 Ford wishbones, actually 35 all the way up to 48, Ford put the axle here and put the spring out front. And a lot of people use these wishbones and they cut the spring hanger off. I like to leave it on because I use it for a front shock mount, lower front shock mount. So I'll show you that when the front end's put on. But I'm going to go ahead and get this welded up. This is a swivel perch. Original Ford perch is all forged one piece without a nut here, and on a wishbone, stock wishbone setup, you pivot in the center so there's no load on this here. But when you split the wishbones, the axle can pivot like this. So I'm using this swivel perch, which will allow a lot of movement in the front end, and you won't ever get any spring bind or anything like that. I like to use these. They're forged. They got a wide parting line. They're forged. This is zinc plated. You can get them out of stainless too, but I'm just going to paint these black. And it's not quite traditional looking with the big nylock nut off the back side of it, but I think it's worth it. I drive these cars a lot. Go ahead and clean them up with a grinder, and then we'll let them cool down while we're putting the front end together. Alright, here's an unfortunate lesson that I just learned, and I should have known better, but I wasn't thinking about it. This is the end of the tie rod with galled threads here, and I've galled the threads on the inside of this back in about 1/4 inch because I threaded this together without any seas or anything, and I got in there and the threads galled with something and it locked up and I couldn't get it out. It took this pipe wrench and this bar pipe to be able to crank this out where it was galled. It tore all the threads out of the last 3/8 inch of this bung, and then I ruined the threads on the end of this, and I marred the side of it all up with the pipe wrench trying to get it out. So now what I gotta do is order another bung. I have another tie rod and I had in stock, but I'm gonna have to order another bung. But in the meantime, it's the weekend and I'm not gonna get it for a couple days. I'm gonna go ahead and saw this off where the threads get good again. I'm gonna saw the end of the bad threads off this, and I'm gonna temporarily thread it together so I can keep fabbing this thing up. I'll get it in here and I'll measure it the same length as the other one, which is already assembled, and then I'll just have this temporarily together so I can mock up the frame and everything, and then I'll have to cut this bung out and weld a new bung in it and put the new tie rod end in. So that was an unfortunate experience. Always use anti-seize when you're threading stuff like this together, because the threads gall and you're stuck and you ruin everything. So there's a lesson for you. Alright, I was able to temporarily rectify my situation here. I cut this one off and I was able to thread the tie rod end in there a little bit and lined it up, so I'm going to go ahead and be able to mock this up, but I'll have to order another bung and cut this one out of here and weld a new one in. But in the meantime, we'll mock it up and keep going. First thing I got to do is swap out the old end shackle ends for the ones for the swivel perches here. Alright. Take my perch bolts, get my wishbones, put the wishbones on here. What happened here? I'm all wonky. These perch nuts are Nylox, and they're fine threaded. I don't have any more, so I don't want to tighten them up and ruin the Nylox, so I'm going to use some washers for spacers temporarily just to take up the gap in the threads, and then when I do final assembly I'll take the washers out and tighten the nuts down. Well, problem number 2, I thought I could use my original front spring that I used when I put the truck together originally. And I must, because the spring was behind the axle, I welded the brackets on, and I ordered a 29-inch wide spring, which doesn't fit the 35 Ford drop axle because that needs a 31-inch wide spring. So that's why I can't get these to draw. I can't get the perches to draw together. I got the spring squeezed down about 2 inches I'm up almost in my C-notch, and I still can't get the go. I'm 1.5 inches away. So I got out the Speedway catalog, which has a guide in for springs, and I measured the spring, and the spring's 2 inches too short. So luckily, I happen to have another front spring. This one's not a Posey spring, so it doesn't have the Teflon buttons, but it's the 31-inch diameter, or a 31-inch length, which if I swap it out, will allow the thing to bolt together. So I'm going to have to change front springs here, and then the thing should go together. So let me go ahead and do that. You always run into little problems like this. Luckily we got parts in stock to switch. because I really be bumming if I didn't have anything to do and it's just the start of the weekend and I want to work on this for 2 days straight, and I'd be really bummed out if I didn't have any parts to work with. If you don't do this stuff all the time, you forget things like this. I mean, I bought this spring 10 years ago. I guess I should have measured it before I put it in, but I figured it was the right spring because I figured I would have got it for that axle, but I didn't have an original axle at the time, so I guess that's how that got screwed up. I really like these Cozy springs though because they got the Teflon buttons in them, and this spring doesn't. I'll have to grease the leaves. Let's see if I can get these bushings out of here. You know what? I think I got other bushings right here in stock. Oh, what's this? New bushings for just such an occasion. There you go. Now, let's see how this goes.
Loosen these up just a shade.
So it's not fighting me while I'm trying to fit it in here. This is looking better already. Where's my anti-seize? Some more anti-seize on here. Get rid of this ratchet strap, won't need that. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. I guess that'll work. Alright, so I got multiple things going on here now. Got the radius rod brackets attached to the back of the radius rods, and I'll show you what I'm working on here now. But I got this 15x7 Mopar cop car wheel. It's similar to the wheels I'm going to run. I've got it mocked up here, laying over the brake drum that was on for the Wide 5 wheels. But what I'm looking for is tire rub at full turn to the radius rod, and I had to kick the rod in. You see over here, I've got the mount mocked up with the tie rod end on the inside of the radius rod and the mount underneath the frame. Originally I was going to mount them like this side with the tie rod end facing out, but it puts the radius rod too far out to the outside of the frame, so when you go full turn, the tire would rub in it quite severely. So I mocked up the tire here so I could have it turn and make sure it's going to clear. Now this tire is a little bit taller than the one I'm going to run. This is a 205 75 15, and I'm probably going to run like a 205 70 on a 15x6 rim. I think they are. I have for this, and this is a 15x7 rim, which has a little bit more backspace, and a 205 75 tire, so it's just a little bit wider. But I've got an inch of clearance, and can't quite get the full lock because the steering arm needs to be heated and bent for the dropped axle, but it's like real close in the ballpark. It would just have enough clearance or barely touch it. So I think I'm all set, but what I'm going to do now is, now that I determined that the mounts need to be flipped, I'll flip both brackets to the inside. Then I'm going to set this front end down to the ride height I think it's going to be at with, like this side I've already got set up at 13 inches to the center of the spindle which is about the height of the wheel and tire I'd be running on this truck, because the bias plies I had on it were too tall. They were 616s, and they're about 2 inches taller than the tires I'm going to run. So I'm going to mock it up with jack stands at the ride height that I want, and then I can use the angle finder here to double check the top of the kingpin to get my caster angle, and I think it's coming in about 8 degrees, which is good. And I like to run about 10, but I can't quite get to 10 without cutting these wishbones and bending them a little bit, so I think 8's going to be fine. But I've gone ahead and got this mocked up where it's going to be, figured this out. I've got 8 degrees, 8 degrees of caster, negative caster, so I'm pretty confident with my locations. I'm going to go ahead and tack these brackets on, and then everything should be good, and then we're going to move on to the rear suspension. So let's do that. Alright, so what I got here is the leaf springs I'm going to be using on the rear of the truck. These are a Ford Pinto pony stock race car leaf spring. They're 150 foot-pound, or they're 150 pound spring rate. I bought them from Landrum Spring, Landrum, but they're I bought them through Speedway, but they're made in USA. They're 150 pound spring rate, which should be good for this 2,500 pound truck. So what I'm doing now is fabbing up parts to make the front spring hanger that's going to mount to the diagonal kick up in the back of the frame, and then I'll be using a factory style rear shackle on this. But let me show you the parts I made so far. So what I did is I went to the scrapyard, and they got a cutoff bin where they throw all kinds of weird shapes and stuff. And I've got these circles. They're 3/16 laser cut circles, and I just grabbed a whole bunch of them for future use. And what I ended up doing was cutting them in half, and I used them to make these spring mounts here. They're going to go on here, and then I got a top plate that's actually going to weld to the bottom of the frame. I got a couple of plug weld holes, and it's going to weld on the edge. But I'm building a spring hanger here, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and tack this together and build 2 of these, and then they're going to mount up to the bottom of the kick up on the frame. Got the front spring perch made. Just got this tacked together. You can see here, got this spring on there, sitting there mocked up. What I'm going to do is make sure I got good center line action. I want to be back 24 inches back to my axle center line. So I've got use the axle pads I'm going to be using. I got a 3-inch piece of exhaust tubing for a little diagram action here. So I can take my line, I can draw down, mark this, and find my center line. Then I can move the spring fore and aft until I get lined up on here. There we go. You can see here I got the rear end in. It's an 8 3/4 Dodge. I got the spring mounts welded up and then tacked to the frame. I got some U-bolts here. You got it temporarily sitting on pads, so it'll you can see what it's going to look like. The bed cover, or the frame covers on the bed will cover up the frame rails, and then the cab will sit down over the frame, so it's going to sit probably about the same height that it did before. These back tires I have on here right now are shorter tire than I'm going to run. It's got a 235 75 15s what I used to run, and these are just 205 75s right now for mock-up. But you get the general idea of what it's going to look like. And there's about 3.5 inches of travel from the rear end to the frame, so that should be plenty for suspension travel. So I'm going to leave this for now as far as I can go until I get my rear shackles. But this is looking pretty good, and we'll go ahead and work on the box. I can see here I got my some Mopar 8 3/4 rear end. It's out of late 60s, I think like B-body Mopar. It's 60 inches wide, which is probably about 2 inches wider than I'd like it to be, but it's what I got to work with. So when I do my rims and tires, it'll look all right because I be close enough. All right, so I'm removing the frame rail covers here on the sides. I'm gonna have to end up. I think I'm gonna have to end up setting the floor of this right on the frame rails. So I was gonna cut down these crossbars, but I think what I'm gonna do with this floor is kind of rough. So I think I'm gonna cut all the bolts and pull the wood floor out, take this cross members off, take this out. We'll start down with the bare sheet metal. Now I'll probably have to build a new subfloor for the bed. And then I've got some red oak that I'm gonna make a new floor out of. But I mean, it's possible it's original. This truck had been apart since the 1970s, and it was painted purple like this back in the 60s. It was a 60s hot rod. But I think I'll do is take all this stuff off. Then I'll have the bare bones floor that I can mock up on the chassis, essentially channeling this about 4 inches, which will help with the cab to box height. Come on now. Ta-da! Uh-oh. Ah! There we go. Look at that. Come on, come to Papa. Come to Papa, let's go. Alright. Yes, sir. Bam! Uh-oh. Also rusty. There we go. The bed's all stripped down. Now I can go set it back on the frame and see how it looks. So when this bed goes back on here, so where those frame rail covers will sit, they'll sit down over the frame and pretty much hide all the channel there, and then the box subfloor will sit on top. So let me get the box back over here and see how it looks. Shoot. Gotta trim the fender reveals. Kick in and they're not wide enough to go over the frame. I gotta trim them off. Reattach them later. Alright, never fear, I've cut these off, but they'll be reattached when I, because they got a dog leg kick in them that's got to be adjusted. They'll be reattached, well, whatever which way they go. Never fear, they'll be reattached when I do the rest of the box. So I'll save these for later. Let's lay this back down. So that's about all I can do for now. I'm going to keep tinkering around with some fitment issues. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Ba-bing, bing, bing. Whoop, whoop. And we'll go from there. Watch out, this could be dangerous. This could be dangerous. Whoa. Hold on. Damn. Right over here. Where is it? Ah! Ah! Where is it? Where is it? There it is.